chandelier crystals caught the evening light, casting diamonds across the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel. David Carter adjusted his cufflinks for the third time, watching his reflection in the elevator's polished doors. At 42, he still cut an impressive figure in his tailored tuxedo, but the lines around his eyes told stories he'd rather forget. Tonight wasn't about him, though. Tonight was about the Carter Foundation Gala, about securing the Japanese investors, about maintaining the empire he'd built while his world had crumbled 18 months ago. His phone buzzed. A text from the agency. "Your companion has arrived. Lobby, near the fountain." Asterisk. David exhaled slowly. Hiring someone to accompany him felt like defeat, but showing up alone to another event, fielding the pitying looks and whispered condolences, felt worse. He needed armor tonight, even if it came in the form of a stranger playing a role. The elevator doors opened, and there she was. Zoe stood by the fountain, her emerald dress flowing like water, catching the light with every subtle movement. Her auburn hair was swept up, revealing the graceful line of her neck, but it was her posture that caught his attention. Perfectly aligned, each movement deliberate, yet fluid, like she was dancing even while standing still. "Mr. Carter?" Her voice was warm honey, professional but not cold. She extended her hand, and when he took it, her grip was firm, confident. "I'm Zoe. Shall we?" They moved through the crowd like a rehearsed dance. Zoe's hand light on his arm. Her laugh perfectly timed at his obligatory small talk with board members. She knew when to speak, when to smile, when to let him lead the conversation. Professional, polished, perfect. "David-san." Mr. Tanaka approached with his delegation. Bowing slightly, "Your foundation's work with children is most impressive." David launched into his prepared pitch about expanding their orphanage programs to Tokyo. But his attention fractured when he heard it, the sound that still made his heart stop. A child crying. "Daddy?" 5-year-old Ava Carter burst through the crowd, her pink tulle dress billowing behind her, tears streaming down her face. The nanny followed helplessly, mouthing apologies. "Daddy, I had a bad dream." And Mrs. Chen said, "You were here and I needed you." The room seemed to pause, hundreds of eyes turning toward the disruption. David's carefully constructed evening threatened to collapse. The Japanese investors valued composure, control, tradition. A crying child at a formal gala was none of those things. But before David could move, Zoe was already kneeling, her dress pooling around her like emerald silk. "Hey there, princess," she said softly, her voice carrying a musical quality that made Ava's sobs hiccup to a stop. "That must have been a scary dream. But look, you're awake now, and dreams can't follow you here. See all these lights? They're dream catchers in disguise." Ava's eyes widened, still glistening with tears. She looked at the chandeliers with new wonder, then back at Zoe. "Really?" "Absolutely. And you know what else? When you hold someone's hand, bad dreams get confused and forget where you live." Zoe extended her hand. Palm up. Patient as morning. "Want to try?" Ava's small fingers wrapped around Zoe's, and something shifted in the room's atmosphere. The child looked up at her father, then back at Zoe, and asked the question that would change everything. "Can she stay forever?" The silence that followed could have swallowed careers. David felt his chest tighten. Saw Mr. Tanaka's expression shift. But Zoe just smiled, lifting Ava effortlessly into her arms, the child's head finding the crook of her neck like it belonged there. "Forever is a very long time," Zoe said gently, swaying slightly, instinctively rocking the child. "But how about we start with tonight? We can count the dream catchers together." Mr. Tanaka stepped forward, and David braced for disaster. Instead, the older man's eyes had softened, watching as Ava's breathing steadied against Zoe's shoulder. "Your daughter has excellent taste. Carter-san, family harmony is the foundation of all success." He looked at Zoe, holding Ava, then back at David. "The three of you make a beautiful picture. We would be honored to partner with a man who values both business and family." The deal that had teetered on networking and numbers suddenly solidified on something far more human. As conversations resumed around them, David found himself watching Zoe with his daughter. She moved through the room with Ava in her arms like it was the most natural thing in the world, pointing out dream catchers, whispering stories about dancing lights. Ava's earlier tears had transformed into giggles, her small hands playing with Zoe's earrings. When Ava finally dozed off against Zoe's shoulder, David approached them near the terrace doors. The city lights sparkled beyond the glass, but he found himself studying the way Zoe's hand supported his daughter's back, the protective curl of her arm. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. Zoe looked up at him, and for a moment, the professional mask slipped. Something raw and real flickered in her green eyes. She needed someone. Sometimes that's all any of us need. Someone to make the scary things less frightening. Can she stay forever? David found himself echoing his daughter's question, though he tried to make it sound like a joke. Zoe's smile was soft, sad, knowing. "I'm whatever you need me to be, Mr. Carter. That's what you're paying for." But even as she said it, her arms tightened infinitesimally around Ava, and David recognized the gesture. It was protection. It was care. It was real. 3 days later, Zoe stood outside David's Beacon Hill townhouse, smoothing her casual sundress. Tonight's performance was different. Dinner with the client and his daughter, playing house for a few hours. The agency had been specific. Be warm but not too maternal. Engaged but professional. She'd done this before, these temporary family scenes. But something about that little girl at the gala had burrowed under her skin. David answered the door in jeans and a cable-knit sweater, looking younger, more vulnerable than the corporate warrior she'd met at the gala. "Thank you for coming." Ava hasn't stopped talking about the dream catcher lady. The house was elegant but eerily quiet, like a museum after closing. Family photos lined the hallway, but they stopped abruptly at a certain point in time, as if history had simply ended. Zoe noticed, but didn't comment, following David through rooms that whispered of absence. "Daddy, is she here? Is the dream lady here?" Ava bounded down the stairs, then stopped. Suddenly shy. She was wearing pajamas covered in butterflies, her dark hair still damp from a bath. "Hi, Princess," Zoe said, kneeling again. "I heard someone wanted to show me their room." Ava grabbed her hand, pulling her upstairs with the urgency only children possess. David followed, watching as his daughter gave Zoe the grand tour. Her dollhouse, her books, the corner where she had tea parties with stuffed animals. "This is Mr. Bunny," Ava explained seriously. "He likes his tea with extra sugar. And this is where Mommy used to sit when she read me stories. But now it's just empty. But maybe you could sit there?" The words hung in the air like a held breath. Zoe carefully sat in the small chair, her dancer's grace making it look less awkward than it should have. "What kind of stories do you like?" As Ava chattered about princesses and dragons, David leaned against the doorframe, something cracking open in his chest. The chair hadn't been occupied in 18 months. He tried sitting there himself, but his presence had only made Ava cry harder for what was missing. "Daddy," Ava announced suddenly, "we should play family." "Sweetheart, I don't think. Please?" "Mrs. Chen plays sometimes, but she says her back hurts." "Zoe has a good back. See? She sits up straight like a queen." Zoe caught David's eye, a question in her glance. He nodded, helpless against his daughter's enthusiasm. "Okay," Ava directed. "Daddy, you come home from work." Zoe, you're making dinner. I'm the baby, but also the dog. The next half hour was surreal and strangely healing. David pretended to come home, hanging up an imaginary coat. Zoe mimed cooking at Ava's play kitchen, narrating elaborate meals. Ava crawled around barking, then suddenly declared herself a baby who needed tucking in. "Now you both have to tuck me in and sing," she commanded from her actual bed. They stood on either side of her, David humming tunelessly while Zoe's voice carried a melody that seemed to wrap around the room like silk. Ava's eyes grew heavy. "Now kiss goodnight," she mumbled. "That's what mommies and daddies do." The air crystallized. David and Zoe looked at each other across the small bed, both frozen. Ava's eyes opened slightly. "Please?" Or the magic doesn't work. Zoe leaned across the bed at the same moment David did. Their lips met briefly, barely a whisper of contact, but something electric passed between them. When they pulled apart, Ava was smiling, already drifting to sleep. "Mommy Z," she murmured. "That's your name now. Mommy Z." They retreated to the hallway in silence, the moment too fragile for words. Downstairs, David poured wine with shaking hands while Zoe stood by the window, watching the city lights. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "She doesn't usually. She hasn't called anyone that since her mother, Zoe finished gently. She'd seen the photos, noticed the woman's absence. How long? 18 months. Cancer. It was quick at the end, but the dying took forever." He took a large sip of wine. Ava was only 3. She remembers just enough to know something's missing, but not enough to really understand what. They moved to the living room, sitting at opposite ends of the couch like teenagers afraid of touching. The silence stretched until Zoe noticed a photo album on the coffee table. "May I?" David nodded, and she opened it carefully. The woman in the pictures was radiant, dark hair like Ava's, a smile that reached her eyes, always in motion even in still photographs. Lily. Her name was written under several photos in careful script. She was a teacher, David said softly. 2nd grade. She used to say she was practicing for when Ava got older. She had so many plans. She was beautiful. She was everything. His voice cracked slightly. "I don't know how to do this without her. I can run a company, negotiate $1-million deals. But I can't braid hair. I can't make the voices for bedtime stories. I can't be both parents, and Ava deserves both." Zoe closed the album gently. "You're doing better than you think. She's happy. She's loved. She's secure enough to still believe in magic. That's everything." Is that professional opinion or personal? She was quiet for a long moment. "Can I tell you something?" Not as Zoe, the hired companion, but just as Zoe. David turned to face her fully, and she saw permission in his eyes. "I was a dancer. Ballet. Not just a dancer. I was going to be principal dancer at the American Ballet Theater. I'd worked for it since I was 4 years old. Every broken toe, every missed birthday party, every hour in the studio was for that dream." She pulled her legs up under her, making herself smaller. Then, a drunk driver ran a red light. My spine was fractured in 3 places. The doctor said I was lucky to walk again. But walking isn't dancing. Dancing was all I knew how to be. "So you became this?" "I became a ghost," she corrected. "I existed for a while. Then I found the agency. It turns out I'm good at being what people need. The temporary girlfriend, the +1, the solution to loneliness that doesn't require actual vulnerability. I play roles. I've been playing them so long, sometimes I forget there was ever a real person underneath. Until tonight?" She looked at him, startled by his perception. "Until a little girl asked me to stay forever. And for a moment, I forgot. I was pretending. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 11. Breaking the spell. Zoe stood, gathering her purse. I should go. David walked her to the door, neither speaking until she was on the threshold. Saturday, he said suddenly. Ava has a dance recital at her preschool. Could you come? Not as a hired. Just come. David, I'll pay the agency rate. That's not. I don't want your money for that. The words escaped before she could stop them. Then what do you want? She looked back at the house, at the warm light spilling from Ava's bedroom window. I want to see her dance. Is that allowed? Can I want something real in all this pretense? Saturday, 2 o'clock, Beacon Street Preschool. She nodded and disappeared into the night, leaving David standing in his doorway, wondering when exactly this arrangement had become something else entirely. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, but the preschool auditorium was bright with paper flowers and construction paper butterflies. David sat in the third row, saving a seat with his coat, checking his phone every 30 seconds. She hadn't confirmed. This wasn't part of their arrangement. He was a fool for hoping. Is this seat taken? Zoe stood in the aisle, rain droplets still clinging to her hair, wearing a simple blue dress and flat shoes. She looked younger, softer, like the dancer she used to be might still be visible underneath. You came. She asked me to stay forever. The least I could do was show up for her first recital. The lights dimmed before David could respond. Tiny dancers tumbled onto the stage in tutus and wings, and there was Ava, front and center, scanning the audience with anxious eyes. When she spotted them, her whole face illuminated. She waved enthusiastically, nearly knocking over the girl beside her. That's my daddy and my mommy Z, she announced to everyone within earshot. David felt Zoe tense beside him, but when he glanced over, she was smiling through tears she was trying not to shed. Without thinking, he reached over and took her hand. She squeezed back, holding on like an anchor. The recital was objectively terrible and absolutely perfect. Children forgot choreography. Butterflies flew in different directions, and one little boy decided mid-performance to take a nap on stage. But Ava danced with her whole heart, her face serious with concentration, occasionally checking to make sure they were still watching. During the finale, Zoe leaned over to whisper, "She has good extension for her age. Natural turnout, too. You can tell that from this chaos? I can tell she loves it. That's what matters. The technique can come later, but the love has to be there first." After the recital, Ava dragged them both to the reception, insisting they meet her teacher, her friends, the janitor who'd helped fix her wings. She held both their hands, creating a chain that felt unbreakable. "Your daughter is special," Mrs. Patterson, the teacher, said to them. "And how wonderful that you both could make it. So many families are split these days, but Ava talks about you both constantly. Especially you." She smiled at Zoe. "Apparently you know real ballet?" "I used to," Zoe managed. "Well, if you ever want to volunteer, we'd love someone with actual training to help with next year's recital." As they walked to the parking lot, Ava between them still clutching both hands, David felt the question hovering. But it was Ava who voiced it. "Mommy Z, will you teach me real ballet? Daddy doesn't know how to point his toes." Zoe knelt down, rain starting to fall again. "Would you like that? It's hard work. Lots of practice. I'm good at hard things. Daddy says I'm determined." "Determined," David corrected, smiling. "That too," Ava beamed. "So will you, please?" Zoe looked up at David, question in her eyes. He nodded, not trusting his voice. "Okay, princess. Real ballet lessons. We'll start tomorrow if your dad says it's okay." "Daddy always says yes to good things," Ava announced confidently. And you're the goodest thing. That evening, after Ava was asleep, full of excitement about ballet lessons and still wearing her tutu over her pajamas, David found Zoe in the backyard. She'd asked to see the space, to figure out where they could practice. The rain had stopped, leaving everything smelling clean and new. She was standing in the middle of the lawn, arms raised in what he now knew was fifth position, balanced on one foot like she weighed nothing at all. Even in street clothes, even after years away from the stage, she was ethereal. "There's enough room," she said without turning. "We could set up a portable bar by the garden. The grass is level enough for beginning positions." "Zoe, I know what you're going to say. This is getting complicated. I'm hired to play a role, not to actually enter your lives." "But David," she turned to face him, and in the fading light, she looked heartbreakingly young. "I haven't felt real in 3 years. Since the accident, I've been a shadow playing at being human. But when Ava looks at me, when she calls me Mommy Z, I remember what it felt like to matter. Is that wrong? Am I terrible for wanting to pretend a little longer? What if it's not pretending?" The words hung between them like a challenge. Zoe shook her head. "Don't. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I'm not her mother. I'm not your girlfriend. I'm a service you hired because being alone was too hard." "You're right," David said, stepping closer. "I hired you because I was drowning in loneliness. But somewhere between the gala and tonight, you became something else. Ava doesn't pretend. Zoe, she doesn't know how. When she loves, it's complete and unconditional. She loves you. Children love easily. They also forget easily. Do you want to forget?" She was crying now, silently, the tears catching moonlight. "I want to remember what it feels like to belong somewhere, even if it's temporary, even if it breaks my heart later." David reached out, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Then stay. Not forever. I'm not asking for promises neither of us can make. Just stay for now. Teach her ballet. Have dinner with us. Be real, even if we don't know what that means yet. The agency. I'll handle the agency. This isn't about them anymore." She looked at the house, warm light spilling from every window, then back at him. "Okay. But we do this honestly. No more pretending. At least not with each other. If this is going to hurt, I want it to be real hurt. Not manufactured pain." "Real," David agreed. "Messy and complicated and real." They stood in the backyard, two broken people making no promises except to try, while inside a little girl dreamed of ballet lessons and butterfly wings, secure in the belief that some things could stay forever if you just loved them hard enough. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt dangerously like belonging. Zoe came over every evening after David got home from work, transforming the backyard into a dance studio. She'd found a used bar online, convinced David to install mirrors against the garden wall, and created magic in the space between dinner and bedtime. First position princess, heels together, toes apart like a duck. Ava, in her new pink leotard and tiny ballet slippers, concentrated fiercely. "Like this, Mommy Z? Perfect. Now, arms in preparatory position, like you're holding a beach ball." David watched from the kitchen window, ostensibly cooking dinner but really memorizing these moments. The way Zoe's hands gently corrected Ava's posture. The patient repetition of movements, the joy that radiated from both of them as they moved together in the golden hour light. Some evenings, Ava would insist David join them. He was terrible, stiff and self-conscious. But Zoe would laugh, not unkindly, and show him again. "Ballet is about feeling the music in your bones," she'd say. "Stop thinking so much. I run a Fortune 500 company. Thinking is what I do. Then stop being a CEO for an hour. Just be David." It was during one of these lessons, as the sun set behind the Boston skyline, that David noticed it. While helping Ava with her grand battement, Zoe was unconsciously performing the movements herself, and for a moment, the accomplished principal dancer she might have been shimmered into existence. The grace was still there, the precision, but also something else. A sadness in the way she caught herself, deliberately making her movements smaller, less than what they could be. After Ava's bedtime that night, he found Zoe sitting on the back steps, staring at the portable bar. "You miss it," he said, sitting beside her. "Every day. It's like losing a language you were born speaking. My body still knows what to do, still wants to do it. But," she gestured vaguely at her back, "the spirit is willing, but the flesh is held together with titanium screws. Have you tried?" "Since the accident?" "Once. About a year after the surgery, I went to my old studio, convinced I could work through the pain, build back up. I lasted 10 minutes before the spasms started. The janitor found me on the floor an hour later, couldn't move." She laughed bitterly. "That's when I finally accepted. It was over. But you're dancing now, with Ava. That's different. These are basics, fundamentals. I could do these in my sleep. Real dancing, the kind that matters, requires something I don't have anymore." David wanted to argue, but something in her voice warned him off. Instead, he changed the subject. "The Lily Carter Foundation is having its annual fundraiser next month. It's for single mothers, helping them get back on their feet. Would you come? Not as a hired date. As you, as Ava's ballet teacher, as whatever you want to be." She looked at him, studying his face in the dim light. "What are we doing, David?" "Really? I don't know," he admitted. "But I know that Ava sleeps better since you've been coming around. I know that this house feels less like a mausoleum. I know that when you're here, I remember what it feels like to look forward to coming home. That's not fair to Lily. Lily's gone." The words came out harder than he intended. "And I loved her completely. Desperately. Until the very last second. But she's gone. And Ava and I are still here. Still living. Still needing. How long am I supposed to be a monument to grief?" Zoe reached over, taking his hand. "You're not a monument. You're a man who loved well and lost terribly. That's not something to be ashamed of. Then why do I feel guilty every time Ava calls you Mommy Z? Why do I feel like I'm betraying Lily every time I watch you with our daughter and think this feels right? Because love isn't replaceable. You're not replacing Lily. You're just making room for something new. Like a garden. When something dies, you don't stop tending the garden. You plant new things, different things. The soil is richer because of what came before." They sat in silence, hands linked, as the city settled into night around them. 2 weeks later, Zoe was organizing Ava's room while the little girl napped. She'd come early to help with housework, not part of any arrangement, just something that had started happening naturally. As she put away toys, she noticed a box on the top shelf of the closet, labeled Ava. Baby things. She shouldn't look. It wasn't her place. But the box was already tipping, and when she caught it, the lid fell off. Inside were the precious artifacts of early motherhood: a hospital bracelet, first photos, a tiny pink hat, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a pair of infant ballet slippers, no bigger than Zoe's palm. Attached was a note in feminine handwriting: "For our little dancer, may she find joy in movement like her mama. Love. Lily." The grief hit like a physical blow. Zoe sank to the floor, clutching the tiny shoes, sobbing for the mother who would never see her daughter dance, for the dreams cut short, for the terrible unfairness of it all, but also crying for herself, For the children she'd never have. For the dreams she'd never fulfill. For the way life could shatter you and expect you to keep walking on broken pieces. She didn't hear David come in until he was beside her on the floor. He didn't ask why she was crying. The baby shoes in her hands told the story. Instead, he pulled her against him, letting her sob into his shirt, his own tears falling silently into her hair. "She bought them the day we found out she was pregnant," he whispered. "Before we even knew it was a girl. She was so sure she'd have a dancer." "She does," Zoe managed between sobs. "Ava's beautiful when she moves. Natural grace. Lily would be so proud. She would have loved you teaching her." Zoe pulled back, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Would she? Or would she hate me for being here, in her house, with her family?" David cupped her face gently. "Lily's last coherent words to me were, 'Find happiness again.' She made me promise not to become a ghost. She said Ava needed to see that life goes on, that joy is possible after loss. So no, she wouldn't hate you. She'd probably be impatient that it took me this long to find you." "I've spent so long playing roles," Zoe whispered. "The perfect date, the ideal companion. Whatever people needed me to be. But here, with you and Ava, I don't know how to pretend anymore. It all feels too real." "Then stop pretending. What if I'm not enough? What if I'm just another broken person trying to use your family to feel whole again? Then we'll be broken together. Isn't that what families are? Broken people, choosing to heal in the same space?" Before she could answer, Ava appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes. "Why are you crying, Mommy Z?" Zoe wiped her face quickly. "Just happy tears, Princess. Look what I found. Your very first ballet shoes." Ava climbed into Zoe's lap, examining the tiny slippers with wonder. "These were mine? Your mama bought them for you," David said, "before you were even born." "My first mama," Ava said matter-of-factly. "She's in heaven now, but Mommy Z is here." "That's good, right, Daddy? We need someone here." The simplicity of child logic cut through adult complications. David and Zoe looked at each other over Ava's head, both recognizing truth in the 5-year-old's words. "Yes, sweetheart," David said finally. "It's very good." That night, after Ava was asleep clutching her baby shoes, Zoe and David sat on the couch. Not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. "I need to tell you something," Zoe said. "About the agency. About what I really do. I know what you do. No, you know the polished version. You don't know about the lonely widowers who just need someone to hold them while they cry. The divorced executives who hire me to make their exes jealous. The men who want arm candy to prove they're still viable. It's not escorting, there's no sex, but it's performance, constant performance. Why are you telling me this? Because if this is going to be real, you need to know who I really am. Not the performance, but the person who's been hiding behind it. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. It kept me alive when dancing died." David was quiet for a long moment. "Do you want to stop?" "I already have. I haven't taken another job since the gala. I couldn't. Every time the agency calls, all I can think about is Ava asking me to stay forever, and I can't. I can't pretend with anyone else anymore." "Then don't. It's my only income. Then we'll figure something else out." He turned to face her fully. "Zoe, I'm not asking you to be anything other than what you are. Broken, complicated, real. All of it. Just be here, with us. Let the rest sort itself out." She kissed him then, sudden and desperate, tasting salt from tears and possibility from hope. When they pulled apart, Both breathless, she whispered, "This is going to hurt, isn't it? When it ends, everything ends," David said softly. "That doesn't mean it's not worth doing." They stayed on the couch until midnight, not talking about forever, not making promises they couldn't keep, just existing in the space between grief and hope, pretending and reality, broken and whole. The next morning was Saturday, pancake day in the Carter household. Zoe had stayed the night. In the guest room, they weren't there yet, and came downstairs to find David and Ava already covered in flour. "Mommy Z, we're making special pancakes. Daddy says I can flip them, but I think that's dangerous." "Definitely dangerous," Zoe agreed, tying an apron around her waist. "Better let me help." They moved around the kitchen like they'd been doing this for years. David mixing batter, Zoe manning the griddle, Ava providing commentary and stealing chocolate chips. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect. After breakfast, "Can we practice my recital dance?" Ava asked, syrup dripping down her chin. "Miss Patterson says I can have a special part if I practice really hard." "Of course, princess. We'll make you the best butterfly that stage has ever seen." David's phone rang. "The hospital." He answered, his face immediately draining of color. "There's been an accident at one of the construction sites. I have to go." "Go," Zoe said immediately. "We'll be fine." He kissed Ava's head, hesitated, then kissed Zoe's cheek. "I'll be back as soon as I can." After he left, the house felt different but not empty. Zoe and Ava cleaned up breakfast, practiced ballet in the backyard, had a tea party with the stuffed animals. It was during this tea party, as Ava poured imaginary tea with intense concentration, that it happened. "Mommy Z, when you and Daddy get married, can I be the flower girl?" Zoe's hand froze, reaching for her tiny teacup. "What makes you think we're getting married, sweetheart?" "Because you love each other. And you love me. That's what families do. It's more complicated than that. Grown-ups always say that," Ava said, sounding exactly like her father. "But it's not complicated. You stay, we're happy. You leave, we're sad. Stay equals good. Leave equals bad. See? Simple." Before Zoe could respond, Ava was up and running toward the house. "I need to show you something." She led Zoe to the stairs, then started climbing them two at a time, always too fast, always fearless. "Ava, careful." It happened in slow motion, and all at once. Ava's foot slipped on the polished wood. Her small body tumbled backward. Zoe lunged forward, catching her partially, both of them hitting the floor hard. But the sound, the terrible crack of Ava's head against the banister, echoed through the house. "Ava, Ava, baby, open your eyes." Blood seeped from a gash on the child's forehead. Her eyes fluttered, but wouldn't focus. Zoe's hands shook as she grabbed her phone, calling 911, then David, leaving a frantic message. The ambulance ride was a blur. Zoe held Ava's hand, whispering prayers she hadn't said since childhood, promises she had no power to keep. "Please, please, please. She's not mine, but losing her would break me. Please." At the hospital, they tried to separate them. "Family only," the nurse said. "I'm her." Zoe stopped. "What was she?" "I'm her mother." "Please." The lie came so easily, felt so true. The nurse looked skeptical but let her stay. David burst into the emergency room 20 minutes later, still in his suit, covered in construction dust. "Where is she?" "What happened?" "She fell. I tried to catch her. I'm so sorry. I should have been closer. Should have." "Stop." He pulled her against him, both of them shaking. "It's not your fault. Accidents happen, but I was supposed to watch her. You trusted me. And I trust you now. We'll get through this together." A doctor appeared. "Mr. Carter, your daughter has a concussion. and needed 6 stitches. But the scans are clear. No fractures. No bleeding. She's lucky. She's asking for you. Both of you, she added, looking at Zoe. She keeps saying she needs her daddy. And Mommy Z. They found Ava propped up in bed, looking small and pale, but alert. I fell down, she announced. But Mommy Z caught me, so I didn't break all the way. David kissed her forehead gently, avoiding the bandage. You scared us, baby girl. I'm sorry. I was trying to show Mommy Z my treasure box. It has the picture from when she stayed forever. What picture, sweetheart? Zoe asked, smoothing the blanket. The one I drew. Of us being a family. I wanted to give it to you so you wouldn't forget to stay. Zoe broke then, silent tears streaming down her face. Oh, princess, I could never forget. Never. Promise. He promised. David reached across the bed, taking Zoe's hand. We both promise. They stayed at the hospital overnight for observation. Zoe and David took shifts, one always awake, watching Ava breathe. During David's shift, he found Zoe in the hallway, calling the agency. Yes, I understand the penalties for breaking contract. Send me the paperwork. I'm done. She hung up to find David watching her. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I can't be 2 people anymore. I can't be Zoe the companion for hire, and Zoe who loves your daughter who loves. She stopped. But the word hung there anyway. Say it. Who loves you? God help me, I love you both, and I don't know when it stopped being pretend and started being everything, but here we are. David crossed to her in 2 strides, kissing her deeply in the sterile hospital hallway. Under fluorescent lights, with the smell of disinfectant all around them. It wasn't romantic. It was desperate and real and necessary. I love you too. Not as a replacement, not as a convenience, not as a solution to loneliness. I love you as Zoe, complicated and broken and perfect exactly as you are. What if I disappoint you? What if I can't be what Ava needs? You already are what she needs. What we both need. Just you, showing up, staying present. That's all. They returned to Ava's room to find her awake, watching the door. Were you? Kissing? Mrs. Chen says when grown-ups kiss it means love. Mrs. Chen is very smart, David said. So you love each other? Yes, Zoe said simply. Good. Can we go home now? Hospitals smell funny. 2 days later they were home, Ava milking her injury for extra ice cream and unlimited cartoons. David had taken time off work, and the 3 of them existed in a bubble of recovery and cautious joy. It was during this bubble that the message came. David's phone buzzed with an unknown number. The message was simple. You should know who you're letting near your daughter. Attached were screenshots from the agency website, Zoe's profile, testimonials from clients praising her performance and ability to become anyone you need. He was sitting in his office when he read it, and the sound that escaped him brought Zoe running. What's wrong? He showed her the phone, watching her face crumble as she read. I was going to tell you everything. I wanted a little more time before reality crashed in. Is this real? These reviews, these men talking about how perfectly you played the role of girlfriend? Yes. But David, what we have isn't what? Another performance? How do I know? How do I know anything about you is real when your job is literally to pretend? Because I quit. Because I'm here, aren't I? Not getting paid. Not playing a role. Just here. Are you? Or is this just a longer con? Get close to the wealthy widower. Make his daughter love you. Secure your position. The accusation hung between them like poison. Zoe stepped back as if slapped. You really think that? After everything? I don't know what to think. I knew you were from the agency, but these men, talking about how you made them believe you loved them. I never said love. Never. That was the one line I wouldn't cross. But you said it to me, because with you it's true. How can I believe that? Ava appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, holding her stuffed bunny. Why are you yelling? The adults froze. Zoe knelt down. Grown-ups sometimes disagree. Princess, it's okay. Are you leaving? The question was small, terrified. Zoe looked at David, waiting. He said nothing. His face stone. I have to go for a little while. But you promised. You promised you'd stay. Ava started crying, the sound tearing through the house. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Zoe was crying too, backing toward the door. David, please. She tried one more time. Don't let it end like this. But he'd turned away, gathering Ava into his arms, his silence more final than any words. Zoe left then, driving through Boston streets, blurred by tears. She went to her sparse apartment, the place that had never felt like home, and collapsed. She'd known it would hurt when it ended. She hadn't known it would feel like dying. She left one thing behind. A letter on David's desk. Her handwriting shaky, but legible. David, every role I ever played was empty. A shell going through motions, saying the right words, being the right person for a few hours. I was good at it because I felt nothing. It was safe. Then Ava asked me to stay forever, and you looked at me like I was real, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to exist, not perform, exist. I love your daughter. I love how she attacks life fearlessly, how she believes in magic, how she never questions whether she's worthy of love. I love teaching her ballet, watching her find joy in movement that I thought had died forever. I love you. I love your terrible dad jokes, your inability to cook anything but pancakes, the way you still set 2 coffee cups out in the morning even though Lily's been gone for over a year. I love your strength and your vulnerability, and the way you're trying so hard to be enough for everyone. I know you can't believe me right now. I know the evidence looks damning. All those reviews, those men calling me perfect, they were talking about an empty vessel who could become whatever they needed. But with you, with Ava, I became myself. Messy. Broken. Real me. The dancer who lost everything. The woman who fell in love when she wasn't supposed to. Until Ava, I had forgotten how to be real. I'm sorry for the deception. I'm sorry for the pain. But I'm not sorry for loving you both. Zoe, 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of Ava asking for Mommy Z every morning. 3 weeks of David explaining that sometimes people leave. 3 weeks of a house returning to its museum quiet. Zoe, meanwhile, had found work teaching ballet at a community center in Dorchester. The pay was minimal, but the children, many from broken homes themselves, needed her. She threw herself into it, creating magic in a dingy studio with flickering lights and warped floors. Miss Zoe, watch me jump. A little boy named Marcus attempted a grand jeté. All enthusiasm and no technique. Beautiful. Now remember, arms like you're flying. She was demonstrating when she saw them through the window. David and Ava, standing on the sidewalk. Ava was in her ballet clothes, pressing her nose against the glass. Zoe's heart stopped, restarted, shattered, rebuilt. All in the space of a breath. David entered first, Ava hiding behind his legs. The other children continued practicing, but Zoe only had eyes for these 2. Ava saw the sign for ballet classes when we drove past, David said carefully. She insisted we come in. Mommy Z, I learned a new move. Daddy watched videos to teach me, but he's not good at it. Ava peeked out, still hurt, but unable to hide her excitement. "Can you show me?" Zoe asked, kneeling. Ava performed a clumsy pirouette. Arms not quite right, balance off, but trying so hard. "Did I do good?" "You did wonderfully." "Want to know a secret to make it even better?" For the next 20 minutes, Zoe taught Ava while David watched from the corner. The other children absorbed Ava into their group, and soon she was laughing, attempting leaps with Marcus, forgetting to be sad. When class ended and parents collected their children, only the three of them remained in the echoing studio. "She hasn't danced since you left," David said quietly. "Hasn't smiled much either." "I'm sorry." "No, I'm sorry. I let fear override what I knew to be true. You're not performing with us. You never were." "How do you know?" David pulled out a white box from his jacket. "Because performers don't leave their most precious possessions behind." Inside were Zoe's old point shoes, the ones from her last performance before the accident. She'd hidden them in the guest room closet, unable to throw them away but unable to look at them either. "You were going to be principal dancer," he said. "I looked you up, Zoe Blackwell. There are videos of you online. You were extraordinary. That was a different person. Number. That's the same person who taught my daughter that bad dreams can't follow you if you hold someone's hand. The same person who catches falling children. The same person who makes my house feel like home." "I'm not done." He set down another box, this one filled with papers. "The Lily Carter Foundation wants to expand into arts education for underprivileged kids. We need someone to run it. Someone who understands both loss and hope. Someone who can teach children that broken doesn't mean worthless." "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you everything. The job, the family, the complicated, messy, beautiful life we're trying to build. I'm asking you to stay." "Daddy, you're supposed to be on your knee." Ava Stage whispered. "That's what happens in movies." David laughed, actually getting down on one knee in the middle of the worn studio floor. "Zoe Blackwell, former principal dancer, current teacher of tiny humans, mother to my daughter, in all the ways that matter. Will you dance through life with us? Not forever, because that's too much pressure. Just for now, and now, and all the nows that come after." "Say yes, Mommy Z," Ava shouted. "We have a ring and everything. I picked it. It's sparkly like your teaching dress." Zoe was laughing and crying simultaneously. How could I say no to that endorsement? "Is that yes?" David asked, still kneeling. "Yes. Yes to all of it. To the mess and the complications and the love that doesn't replace anything, but makes room for everything." He stood, sliding the ring onto her finger. A simple sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, exactly the kind of thing a 5-year-old would choose. It was perfect. Ava crashed into them, creating a 3-person hug that nearly toppled them all. "Now we're forever?" "Now we're forever," Zoe confirmed, kissing the top of her head. "Can we get married here?" Ava asked. "In the ballet place? With all the kids?" David and Zoe looked around the shabby studio with its flickering lights and scuffed floors, and saw what Ava saw. A place where magic happened. Where broken things learned to move again. "I can't think of anywhere more perfect," Zoe said. 6 months later, the community center studio had been transformed. Fairy lights wound around the bears, paper lanterns hung from the ceiling, and every child from Zoe's classes had made paper flowers that covered the mirrors. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't what anyone would expect from David Carter, CEO. It was absolutely perfect. Zoe stood in the small office that served as a dressing room, wearing a simple ivory dress that moved like water when she turned. No veil, just flowers in her hair that Ava had picked that morning. "You ready, Miss Zoe?" Marcus peeked in, wearing his best shirt and a bow tie that was already crooked. "Almost." "Is everyone here?" "Everyone. Even Mr. Johnson from the hardware store." And Ava's been practicing her flower throwing for like an hour. The door opened fully, and David appeared, breaking tradition but not caring. "You're beautiful. You're not supposed to see me yet. I've been seeing you since that first night at the gala. Really seeing you just took longer." He adjusted a flower in her hair. Lily would have loved this. All of it. The studio, the kids, you. "I hope so. I know so. Ready? I've been ready since a little girl asked me to stay forever." The ceremony was beautifully chaotic. Marcus played a recorder version of Pachelbel's canon that was more enthusiasm than accuracy. Ava scattered petals with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb, making sure every inch of the aisle was covered. The community center kids sat in folding chairs, wiggling constantly but beaming. David's vows were simple. "You didn't replace anyone. You made a new place in our hearts we didn't know existed. You brought music back to a silent house and taught us that broken things can still dance. I promise to love you through every position, from first to fifth, in grand jetés and failed pirouettes, forever and always." Zoe's voice shook with tears. "You gave me a reason to keep moving when I thought my dance was over. You and Ava showed me that sometimes the best performances are the ones where we forget we're performing and just live. I promise to stay, to be real, to love you both with every broken and healing piece of my heart. And I promise to teach Daddy better ballet," Ava shouted from between them, causing the entire room to laugh. When David kissed Zoe, Ava wrapped her arms around both their legs, declaring, "Now we're a family sandwich." The reception was in the same studio, transformed into a dance floor. No fancy caterers. The community center families had all brought dishes, creating a potluck feast that filled 3 tables. David's business associates who'd attended looked initially uncomfortable in the humble setting. But soon, Mr. Tanaka was teaching Marcus origami, while Miss Patterson from Ava's preschool led a conga line. "Dance with me?" David asked, pulling Zoe onto the floor. "You still can't find the beat," she teased. "But let him lead anyway." "Maybe not. But I found you." They swayed together, surrounded by their patchwork community, Ava dancing circles around them, the fairy lights making everything glow. "No regrets?" Zoe asked. "Only one." Her heart stuttered. "What? I should have asked you to stay forever that first night. I wouldn't have been ready then. We needed the journey, even the painful parts, especially those. How else would we know this is real?" 1 year later, the Carter Ballet House occupied a renovated warehouse in Dorchester, funded by the Lily Carter Foundation and run by its director, Zoe Carter. The studios were filled with children from all over Boston. Some who could pay, many who couldn't, all who needed a place to belong. "Positions, everyone," Zoe called out, moving between tiny dancers. Her assistant, a college student named Maria who'd started in Zoe's first community center class, helped with the younger kids. Through the window of her office, she could see David in a board meeting, having converted part of the building into a satellite office so he could be close. He caught her eye, winking, and she blew him a kiss that made the investors look confused. "Mommy Z, look." Ava, now 6.5, demonstrated a perfect arabesque. "Maria says I'm ready for toe shoes soon." "Not quite yet, princess. Your bones need to grow a bit more. But I'm growing super fast. Daddy measured me yesterday and I'm almost as tall as the refrigerator." "The refrigerator handle, baby?" "Not quite the whole refrigerator." The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, and Zoe watched her students, their students, find joy in movement. Some would become dancers, most wouldn't, but all of them were learning that grace wasn't about perfection, but about getting up after you fall. "Mrs. Carter?" A new parent stood nervously at the door. "I'm Sarah Thompson. We talked on the phone?" "About my daughter Emma? She was in a car accident last year, and the doctors said she'd never walk normally again. But she insists she wants to dance." Zoe saw herself in the woman's eyes, the desperate hope, the fear of another disappointment. "Where's Emma?" A little girl on crutches appeared, maybe 7 years old, determination written across her face. "I can stand on my own for almost a minute now." "That's wonderful." "Want to know a secret? Dancing isn't about perfect legs. It's about finding the music inside you and letting it out, however you can. We'll find your dance, Emma. I promise." As Sarah Thompson filled out paperwork, wiping away tears, David appeared with coffee. "You're doing it again," he said softly. "Doing what?" "Saving people. They save themselves. I just provide the music and the space." That evening, after the last class, the Carter family held their own practice session. David had marginally improved, though he still looked like a bear attempting Swan Lake. Ava was all concentration and joy. And Zoe moved with a freedom she'd thought lost forever. Not the technical perfection of her former life, but something better. Dance infused with story, with survival, with love. "Daddy, lift Mommy Z like in the videos." "I don't think my back can handle that, sweetheart." "Try," Zoe said, positioning herself. "I trust you." He lifted her, just for a moment. Just enough for her to feel flight again. When he set her down, all three of them were laughing, tumbling into a group hug on the studio floor. "Tell us the story again," Ava demanded. "About how we became a family." Zoe pulled Ava into her lap, David's arm around them both. "Once upon a time, there was a little girl who asked someone to stay forever. And she did." Ava interrupted. "She stayed, and stayed, and stayed." "Yes, she did. Because sometimes, when you're very lucky, pretending becomes real, and broken people create something whole, and dancing happens in all sorts of ways. Not just in studios, but in kitchens and backyards, and hospital rooms and hearts. And they lived happily ever after?" Zoe looked at David, at Ava, at the studio walls covered with photos of their students, at the corner where Lily's portrait hung with a plaque reading, "In memory of a teacher who believed in tomorrow." "They lived happily," she said. "Ever after is still being written." Later that night, after Ava was asleep, Zoe and David stood in their backyard where it all began. The portable bar was still there, now weathered but sturdy. "Do you miss it?" David asked. "The life you would have had? How can I miss something that led me here? Every choice, every loss, every moment of pretending to be okay when I wasn't. It all led to you and Ava. To our studio full of kids who need what I needed. To this life I never imagined but can't imagine living without. The investors think I'm crazy, you know, running board meetings from a ballet studio. Are you? Completely, beautifully, irrevocably crazy. About you, about our daughter, about this life we've built on the ruins of our old ones." They danced then, under the stars, to music only they could hear. Not perfectly. David still couldn't find the beat, and Zoe's back would only allow so much. But they danced with the knowledge that some things are worth the pain, that families can be built from scratch, that love doesn't replace what was lost but creates space for what's found. Inside, Ava dreamed of ballet shoes and butterflies, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow her Mommy Z would be there, that her daddy would make pancakes, that their strange and beautiful family would continue its dance through whatever music life played next. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a tutu, was a drawing in crayon. 3 figures holding hands, dancing. Underneath, in Ava's careful printing, "My family. We dance together. Forever and always." And they did.